Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let's hop in. So today is July 4th, Monday. So that is a holiday in America, and so as not really to celebrate much of anything, I think most people, or at least a good percentage of Americans and United Statesians, uh, simply take it as a holiday to shoot off fireworks and barbecue, and that's certainly in the spirit that I'm going to later this day celebrate it. So the stream may be a little bit shorter in that effort. Let's see. There was a notification here regarding the rank seasons. Let's see. What is? It doesn't seem like there's really anything different, other than I guess the season 7 ends on July 31st. And no announcement of any new festival, which is good because I don't want to get into another festival. So we'll just have to play ranked. We don't really even need to know what the daily quests are. We can just hop in and start playing ranked. Okay. So for the accountability section, I guess I've been burning through games fairly quickly because I played Detention, and then I swear I played something before I started playing Edna and Harvey, Harvey's New Eyes, but maybe I didn't. Yeah. I may very well have not actually done anything between those two games, or I played a very short game that was just so incredibly short it was in one ear and out the other, and I've completely forgotten it, and I just don't think that's the case. So yeah, I must have after that point played Edna and Harvey's New Eyes. I really powered through that, making hour-long episodes of the point-and-click adventure, and still the game oddly felt too long. It really is a pacing issue more than a length issue, because there's 4 or 5 puzzles in the entire game as far as actual separate different types of puzzles. There's plenty of other point-and-click elements that are better integrated as far as puzzles, but when you get to a screen and on that screen there's a puzzle and you have to solve that puzzle before you can leave that screen, there's only 5 of those, and you can skip all of them, and there's an achievement for skipping all of them, and there's an achievement for not skipping all of them. It creates this weird scenario, and then the game has multiple endings, 3 different endings, and doesn't really tell you when the ending is about to happen, so you have to save fairly quickly, but then it doesn't really tell you how to save either, because you have to go hit escape, go to the main menu, click on saved games, then click on an empty spot, and only once you've clicked on an empty square, then it pops up a button that says you can save. So the whole game is just really poorly optimized. I know it's one of Daedalic's earlier games. It's fairly obvious that that's the case, because when I tried to do a second playthrough listening to the developer commentary is not dubbed into English, so you have this, the creator Pokey, this is what he goes by, talking in German, and just a big old wall of text, because it's quite a lot of developer commentary, and that's just so incredibly distracting because the rest of the game is actually voiced in English. So I did about an hour of developer commentary, and then after that point I said I can't put up with this. This is just too distracting. I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm ignoring everything that's being said, in favor of also trying to speedrun the game at the same time. for achievements. There's an achievement called 99 red balloons where you have to ask for 99 red balloons, which means you have to click probably 99 times. I didn't count. I don't think anyone would ever actually count, but it definitely was more than 50 times that I had to click, and my finger definitely hurt there at the end of that, and then just no point for that. On top of being that insane challenge, there's also every other achievement is centered around doing a lot of things 15 times, whereas there's like a portrait of the Last Supper that that is in the game, and it has some pretty funny dialogue when you click on it, and that is the reward for clicking on it, where that really should have been an achievement. Like 4 point and click adventures, clicking on something and seeing clicking on something in the background that's not really that important, that should be the achievement, not clicking on somebody 15 times to get an achievement. And so it's just bad pacing even in the achievements, I suppose. So because I only got one ending and didn't have a save anywhere around that, I start immediately after beating the game, started playing it a second time, and now I feel like I've stupidly trapped myself into playing the game a second time and trying to speedrun it, and even trying to speedrun it is still going to take 4 or 5 hours just because the pacing's so optional. There's just nothing you can do to click fast enough to skip through dialogue, to click fast enough to skip through any interactions, because there's always these little slight pauses, and it's not like the first game of Myst where you could solve all the puzzles by doing something very simplistic at the beginning, or something that you would just never think of at the beginning. You have to go through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. As for the quality of the game itself, I do think it is probably a step up from the original Edna and Harvey game, but it's not really an Edna and Harvey game. Edna plays a very minimal role. Harvey plays a very minimum role. You're playing as a girl named Lily throughout the entirety of the game. So it really should be, if anything, Lily and Harvey as the name of the series. So yeah, it does have a tendency to make the of my vague memories of the first Edna and Harvey game, I think it makes Lily a little bit better of a character in that she doesn't really speak ever, so you can just put your own emotions and thoughts into her as a personality, because she has none of her own really. Whereas Edna, I think, was actually written like a character, and I think that is better for writing but worse for video games, and it's an odd instance in which there are conflicts there. And because Harvey isn't around really for the vast majority of the game, you don't have the problems with the first Edna and Harvey game, where Harvey was just completely insane and a manifestation of the insanity that exists in the mind of Edna, and that at the end of the first Edna and Harvey game, I think they pretty much pointed out that Harvey was totally insane and and evil. And not just insane. Evil is the right term. So, let's see. Oops. I don't know what happened and what went wrong there. Should have been able to use this ability. But yeah, you definitely paint yourself into a stupid corner where it's fairly obvious that it being called Edna and Harvey's New Eyes, the title really should have just been Harvey's New Eyes and not the Edna and Harvey top line, because Edna's kind of ridiculously not in the story. But you if you were going to go down that route, you would have wanted to make sure that there was room for a sequel, and there really is no room when you have something called Edna and Harvey, and then the second game doesn't have Edna in it, and you can't make a sequel with Lily because then you ignore the first game too much, which is what they already did in the sequel. And that certainly gets proven because the third game that they have is just called Night of the Rabbit, and I'm not sure that story is going to even begin to try to connect to the other two Edna and Harvey series. I think the idea with Lily also is that they wanted a slightly younger character. Edna is very tall and more like an angsty teenager, where Lily is more of a sweet little girl that's like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, something like that. I will say the art style, it takes some time to get used to in, I think, pretty much all Daedalic games. But yeah, I think about, in my fuzzy memory, just how incredibly long Deponia became after, with just so many sequels and so many chapters being added. And it definitely feels like there's an alternate universe where Daedalic tried to make a few more diverse stories for point-and-click adventures instead of focusing in on their successful series of Deponia, most certainly, but then also Edna and Harvey. But yeah. So now I've for this horror block, I wasn't even thinking Edna and Harvey was going to be that horrific, but it is pretty gory. There's a lot more death in it than you would think at the beginning. And then there was that other game that I can't even remember the name of, where a little girl had magic powers, and in a lot of ways it feels very much similar to Harvey's New Eyes. So I feel like they probably made that game as kind of a spiritual successor to Harvey's New Eyes. But yeah, it is very weird now, certainly because Daedalic Publishing has really no interest in point-and-click adventure games at all. They made their success on it, and now they are much more focused on Lord of the Rings Golem with WB. plus several other games that they're publishing. Which definitely points out that there's effectively been a death in a dying industry as far as point-and-click adventure games. In anyways, with Daedalic not being interested in that, we're back to there being just the occasional person willing to try to make a point-and-click adventure, but no company that is really committed to that. Although, if you compare the way it went with Daedalic and they succeeded compared to Telltale and the way they completely failed and went out of business, I suppose Daedalic is not upset one bit by its outcome. I think the Link characters you want to keep in your graveyard. But yeah, oddly, Harvey's New Eyes is not too off of a more kind of kid-friendly version of I have no mouth and yet I must scream, because that was a game where emotion certainly played a big role, and Harvey's New Eyes, you're like hypnotized to be unable to do certain actions, and so you're having to break those hypnotic controls in the middle chapter. But it does take like 2, 3, 4 hours before you get to that part. So if you had told me that the first chapter of the game was originally sold by itself or even free as a demo, and then the second chapter came out as an expansion, and then the third chapter came out, I'd kind of believe it, because each of the chapters are long enough for them to be episodes. I don't think you'd call them standalone games. But yeah, once again it gets to like a pacing issue where in the first chapter you're killing a lot of people with no restrictions, and then there should probably be some echoing of each person you kill leading towards why the restrictions are put on you. Like one of them is don't play with fire, so if you had specifically and much more obviously played with fire and that ended up killing somebody in the first chapter, that would make sense. But then you, in the second chapter, break the rule, the hypnotic suggestion that you can't play with fire, and when you do that, I don't know if that then ends up killing anybody either. And I don't know if that theme really falls through to the third chapter so much. The third chapter really wants to just kind of remind you of the events of the first game, which I didn't even really enjoy. This is a weird game for me to cover in general because it is a game that I literally did not enjoy the prequel, but I've already bought the games, and honestly I need not force myself to only play games that I'm 100% certain I'm gonna like. I need to sharpen my edge as a video game critic and actually play some games that I will potentially know going in I'm not going to potentially like. That doesn't mean I'm going to jump into playing something like Call of Duty, or that would be a multiplayer focused first person military shooter, because I know as a genre I'm not going to come in with any positivity on that. But Harvey's New Eyes is a point-and-click adventure game. I do love point-and-click adventure games. I do have a decent amount of experience playing point-and-clicks. So there's enough of a reason to go through that. And that's pretty much, I think, all I've done as far as playing video games, but that actually was a lot of content because of how many hours Ed and Harvey was. I have, however, also been wasting a lot of time. I wasted 24 hours trying to sign in to Apple TV in the first place. I had a iTunes account. As somebody who's never used iPhones or anything, I had one I made up to install iTunes on my computer to use the Apple audio encoding. I never even did anything with it. It was just I was experimenting to see if that was something I wanted to do as far as recordings, and gave up on that. So I had an account, but it was old and it was not verifying the information because it didn't have the two-factor enabled that they wanted. So I couldn't log into the original iTunes account, so I had to make a new iTunes account. And in the process of making a new Apple ID to start with, then it told me I needed an iCloud account, and then it told me I needed an iTunes account. And every time it told me it needed a new account, because the new accounts use two-factor authentication, it was texting me a two-factor authentication code. So when I was just about to install iTunes on my computer and log into that, it said, oh, you've received too many authentications for today. So it literally took me 24 hours and a lot of frustration. It was probably 3 hours of being frustrated trying to get it to work directly, then waiting 24 hours to try it again just to lock in the Apple TV, which I have to say now was not worth the effort. All I wanted to watch was this Apple TV original called Severance, which I would unfortunately have to just say don't bother with at the moment, because it ended on a season cliffhanger, and I would say in general it has a lot of feeling of Lost, where it has opened up a lot of mysteries and not bothered to solve any of them in the first season. The general premise of Severance is weird, to say the least, but basically it's a weird, surreal story where people surgically have their brains split in half, and when they're at work they have one personality and one set of memories, and when they're out of work they have their original personality and original set of memories. Now, that concept, I really wish they had played more with that as far as the positives before they just immediately showed the many, many negatives to that concept. But at a certain level, it may have some appeal. Because if you were just to say to somebody, if you could take a pill and black out all the events of the last 8 hours working, and so it just felt like you showed up at work and then you blinked and then they hand you a paycheck and then you leave, that sounds great. But it fails in reality for many, many reasons. Let's go ahead and do this hit now. And it fails in the TV show for even more reasons. The main problem with this concept is, at a certain point, if you have this technology, then why can't you just automate the jobs in the first place and institute a universal basic income? Why can't you just let humans have those 8 hours instead of literally selling not only their time in this case, but selling their consciousness Uh, but also in reality, it does not leave any door open at all for knowing even what your work conditions are, how you're being treated, workers' rights, negotiating a better salary, forming a union, striking, anything. It's like the ultimate union busting you could possibly do is to have effectively a slave consciousness that you can do anything you want to, and the people outside will never know. Uh, yeah. So, yeah, and those are definitely concepts that were going to need to be addressed in the story. It's just for a series that has like 9 episodes, you're probably 1 episode in before you start to realize that there's major problems with this, and then they heavily have to start leaning on to the mysteries and the weirdness of the work environment, because it's not just, oh, they're in an office and they're working some crappy job. It's they're in this office and they're doing this weird job that's also crappy. And certainly if you've never worked in a big corporate office, you probably won't relate as much to Severance. There is a definite weird religious pseudotone that is put around all the work rules and the way the work treats people. That they are not employees. They can't really quit. They aren't really fired. But yeah, the whole thing definitely is a farcical 5 miles out take on what a crappy job is, a crappy corporate office job is, certainly. And it is definitely questionable how many stories you can really write around that if you're a TV writer, because TV writers or movie writers or any kind of writer tends not to be the type of people who have spent 15 years working in a crappy office job. They may have worked for a year or two and before they became a writer, but that would be my guess. And there's a lot of people that aren't in office jobs that wouldn't ever have that experience either. But yeah, there is definitely a possibility that Severance might be worth watching if they continue to give it another series and wrap it up. If it went 5 seasons, I think that they could wrap everything up and go somewhere with it. But I'm not really certain that that's what's gonna happen with Apple TV originals, because there's so few of them. So after that, after watching all of Severance and just marathoning it in like 2 days, I started watching Ted Lasso, because I've heard everybody loves Ted Lasso, and yeah, it's fine. I'm a little shocked I'm a little shocked that I do relate to it as much as I do, considering it is basically an American football coach doing UK British soccer football, but that's really side that's really not a part of it that matters. The teams could be playing anything, that they're not actually talking about the sport. They're not actually showing them play the sport that much. It is much more about relationships and I guess unbridled optimism of the main character, Ted Lasso. So I'm watching that, and that'll be fine. But looking at the Apple TV originals, there's like 5. That's pretty much it. It's just like 5 originals. So So I have no idea why people would like Apple TV. Like, the hardware I had heard was good, but I don't think they've come out with a recent Apple TV box. The software on Roku is awful. It's got basically no cache in it, and the networking has been hiccuping quite a bit, so the buffering is not as good as, say, Netflix. And maybe that is a case where I need to once again try to put some quality of service on my network, but honestly I think it is just a problem with the Apple TV software not buffering enough. But yeah, a competitor to Netflix, Apple TV is not. It's not even really set up in such a way that I think you could make a good experience by buying other third-party streaming services and connecting them all, whereas Hulu and Amazon Prime at least have that going for it. And so if I watched an entire TV season of Severed, and I watched 4 to 9 episodes of Ted Lasso, undoubtedly I've been spending more time watching TV than anything else. Although it does feel kind of balanced, and maybe there is just a work-life balance argument to be made that I should do 2 or 3 episodes of pre-recording footage for YouTube and then watch a single episode. I wish I could find more shows that are closer to the 30-minute mark instead of the hour-long mark. Oh, I should have activated that, shouldn't I? Oh, that was stupid of me. But yeah, it tends to be the case that if there's something that is even slightly attempting to be good, it tends to go longer. And let's see, do we have enough here? Yeah, we do. So if I summon this here and then activate this here, I can do this, doing that. Go ahead and activate that to banish that. Go ahead and summon that, I guess. That was the wrong position to put that in. I should have put it over here in the corner. Yep, she used her Ash Blossom in pretty much the worst spot ever. One of the things I've been thinking about, and it's kind of pointless to think about it because I'm never going to make a social media site, but this is kind of a great example, is Reddit specifically, and this is a Twitter post, and I'll get to why I'm mentioning it now in a second, but Reddit specifically has a problem with reposts. And you see it across the entire internet where somebody posts a picture and then they use that picture to contextualize something completely different that has nothing to do with the picture. So there's a lie in the source image, or for demonstration purposes there's a lie in the description, or it is just a repost of something that society has already processed and gone through. Most recently, there was an example of this in that somebody posted a picture of babies in these kind of weird plastic tubes that do admittedly look weird, that hold their arms up so they can get x-rays. And the post on Reddit is a post from is reposting something from Facebook, where somebody has used that image as a contextualized to say that the babies are being put into giant human blenders, and that these babies, who are clearly like 2 years old, they're not newborns by any means, are being blended up as some kind of late term abortion thing that is happening in reality. It's total absolute insanity. And the Facebook post in itself even goes far enough to say, stop saying this is for x-rays, babies don't have bones. Which like, maybe at some level some bones aren't fully fused in 2-year-olds, but certainly there would be reasons to have to do an x-ray. So yeah, it's an insane Facebook, probably posted by not even somebody who is real. It's probably Poe's Law, where it is a troll pretending to be pro-life and pretending to be crazy, so other more liberal Facebook people, Reddit people laugh at it. Like, inherently, you have to just assume, if you want to have a happy time and a realistic perspective on the internet, you have to just assume that there's a high chance every post you're seeing is either by a bot or by a troll. Troll being pro something that they're not actually pro for, or against something that they're not actually against for, just to engage, to increase engagement or to increase frustration, or just troll people. But the problem there, even on the next step, is that this Facebook post almost certainly has already been posted to Reddit. Pretty much everything has already been posted to Reddit. So if I was ever to make a social media service, which I don't know why I would make a social media service, almost certainly what you need to do is you need to think of it from a historical repost element. If you could remake Reddit today, you would say, we've got to do something about these reposts. Not that you can't repost something, but it needs to not be presented like it's a brand new thing, or like it's something that's happening right now, when it isn't a topic that's happening right now. If anything, you probably need to categorize and make topics of certain things. On the more political elements, there was definitely years and years in which people were posting the same thing about Hillary Clinton's private email servers. Definitely tons of reposts of the same things. As far as what Trump said or did. But there's no chronological linking back in something like Reddit. Nor is hyperlinking in HTML really done as much as it should be. I'm noticing Mango is on the chat. He says, you're doing friendly battles. Sorry, not today. Like, I feel like I've had to say no to people twice in a row that have asked this between different streams, but it being 4th of July, I have to kind of end this stream fairly early, so I don't have time to to get to play friendly battles, yeah, or do anything extra really. So, if thinking from that perspective of social media needing some time stamps and some chronological linking, here's a great example. In November 16th, 2021, Streamlabs OBS was using the name Streamlabs OBS. They eventually dropped the name OBS and just called themselves Streamlabs, making a lot of confusion between the free open source open broadcast software and Streamlabs skinning of open broadcast software and selling it more as a package deal. And there definitely was a controversy around that, and it's not like that controversy should be hidden, but the danger here is that this post here of them having this fight and the comment here that kind of starts this fight stays on Twitter forever. And then they put a comment here that says 50 minutes ago compared to a year ago, nearly. For those reading this thread today, we are now on great terms with Streamlabs. They moved quickly to update the name of Streamlabs Desktop, their name, and have shown commitment to working together to build the community. So, yeah, that fight went public. It probably shouldn't have, but I guess OBS felt that they needed to go that way. There's plenty of businesses out there, even open source businesses, that have these kinds of fights and they keep them quiet. But inherently, this is the problem with Twitter, is that they've commented on it, and so they've brought this post back into everybody's feed, which at some point, I guess that reinforms people that they are no longer fighting, but also it reminds people of the fight that most people wouldn't have even remembered. So how do you fix that if you were going to have more of a chronological social media forum service? I think you just have to label everything old. I think that would be the general idea, is to say, hey, here, this day in history, or something like that. Definitely when I look at Facebook, the vast majority of my personal Facebook is me looking at memories of things I posted in the past, and potentially reposting them. So I'm definitely not immune from reposting old things. But I'm also kind of uniquely boring in that I usually don't have a lot of new things that I post to my personal Facebook. I really don't post anything personal on the Facebook, so I'm totally not using it correctly anyways. Yeah, if anything, I would say there's probably a case where the entire internet needs a heavier emphasis on timestamps. As the internet gets older and older, it is getting easier and easier to find something that is hugely out of date. Particularly, you will see it when you're trying to install anything on Linux, or find any kind of instructions or walkthrough for computer stuff. Very quickly you'll find that the most popular link that Google gives you, that front page, very possibly is from 10 years ago, and things have changed, or things often haven't changed. So you're just taking this big risk. Not that everything has to be brand new, and I don't want the internet clogged up with people just updating their uh, posts and their little blog sites just to make it look like it's new. Reddit, I'd say YouTube, somewhat uniquely, doesn't have as much of a problem there, because the algorithm itself really only cares about new things anyways. So if you, for instance, want to watch a 10-year-old YouTube video, it very possibly will still get recommended to you if that's the best option. And if anything, I would say YouTube has the opposite problem, where it is so obsessed about brand new stuff that old stuff doesn't get given a chance. Like, there definitely are a lot of YouTube content creators who may have become lapsed content creators and stopped making content just because they weren't feeling like they were really succeeding. And if they all of a sudden got notifications that some video they made from 4 or 5 years ago has gotten a huge spike in views, gotten 1 million views, that might bring them back. Let's keep on playing. Of course, that might also just be my personal feelings, because as a YouTube content creator, I definitely have like 5-year-old videos that I would love to see get more views. At a certain point, though, it's slightly a different thing, and I know I'm probably rambling and not making much sense here, but it is slightly a different thing to say, to have something like Reddit that says, hey, this picture was created at this time, this is the context around this picture, this comment was posted at this time, this is the context, the real context around this. People talking about it now are just reposting it, and there really is no context. Certainly it is dangerously getting close to becoming an arbitrator of the truth, or becoming a news source that has to actually research every post. But there are definitely basic things, like if every single picture posted on Reddit immediately linked to a Google reverse image search, for instance, and immediately brought back the oldest instance of that picture, that works fairly well. If every single comment of text immediately went through some kind of compression and was able to be searched as far as, is this sentence of text a comment that has been posted 10 years ago previously, and it may only really matter as far as the connections in general, or how much is being posted, because it'd be very easy to say, if a comment doesn't have 5 words in it, you don't need to really check that as far as being a repost. But if a comment has, say, 100 words in it, then that probably is something that may have already been said before. It would be very trivial to slightly change a comment with 100 words to make it new. If we had a different kind of internet where everything that was posted to the internet was kind of blockchained, you would by default have something like that, where anything posted to the internet would be anything that had already been posted to the internet would be already on the blockchain, so you couldn't claim it as an original or new. Now, using the blockchain to show chronology versus who actually owns that original sentiment is a different use, certainly. but it still very well might work. Of course, I'm really just rambling about a fictional new competitor or something to Reddit that probably should exist or should be experimented with, at least, that will probably never happen. It doesn't address in any ways, being a better system doesn't address in any ways the amount of startup capital and investment that you're going to need to try to be a competitor to Twitter or Reddit or Facebook or anything like that. Well, that sucked. That totally sucked. I guess we put that in our hand. In the turn. But yeah, suffice it to say that that's a very long conversation to just talk about something I've been thinking about. Yeah, I definitely would have liked to see the internet evolve to do a lot more than it actually does. To be a lot more connected in general, and a lot more accessible and searchable. Like, the internet as it is basically has people going to maybe 5 to 12 websites and on average, and you're mostly unable to use the internet unless you are using a search engine to find anything else. Whereas by default, the internet should work without Google existing. It's a sad statement to have to say that Google fixed and saved the internet that would have been very much relegated to AOL and MSNBC sites being your landing home pages, and whatever those corporations decide you see would being the only thing you see, where and you're getting very much a curated experience of the internet. Or web rings, which people don't even remember web rings were a thing, where there were actual links at the bottom of websites to take you to other websites because you had no chance of finding another website. It definitely was not a situation in the early days of the internet where you could just type anything in and add a .com to it and you would be somewhat close to finding something legitimate. I mean, even Amazon.com really makes no sense as a URL. So if Amazon.com had existed in that first implementation of the internet, I imagine most people would have never visited it or known it existed. Like, it being a pun on the idea that it was going to sell books, and this, because it was going to sell books, it was going to have an Amazon rainforest worth of trees or wood. If anything, it's kind of a nefarious name when you think about it. All right. We're just going to lose here. Once again, Spicy Horse seems to have not gotten any of their games relisted on Steam. That is crazy to say the least. So the story continues, or the question continues, as far as that. That question may just continue for a while. The Steam Summer Sale is still happening, and I'm probably not doing the best job getting the trading cards, and I kind of don't really care about trading cards and badges anymore. I've broken myself of that habit. I could spend $100. I should spend $100 on games, but yeah. It kind of sucks because all of the sales tend to happen at the same time. Plus, right now, everything's expensive. Gas is expensive. Food's expensive. It doesn't make the most sense to take money off the table just to fill up a Steam account full of games. There is a possibility that hardware might get a little bit cheaper in some instances, so might not be the worst time to think about starting to save for building a new computer. Not that I need a new computer. I think my computer is finally fixed and bug-free with software, but who knows? I'm still testing that out with the fresh install of OBS. But there are definitely other people who have been waiting to buy a new computer. If anything, it's probably a better strategy now to always buy something that's a generation behind in computers. It probably has always been a good idea to kind of do that, but definitely more recently. In the old days, getting a Pentium 2 when the Pentium 3 was out would be insane, certainly, but getting a 12th gen Intel i7 instead of a 13th gen Intel i7 probably makes a lot of sense, particularly since the 13th gen of the Intel CPUs are new technology. So it may not be always the case that buying the previous generations of hardware is the right choice, but buying the last generation of a certain technology probably is a good choice. But of course, could be all kinds of little problems. But certainly computers aren't offering a lot new. It's just going to be faster, maybe smaller, maybe more power efficient components. Ray tracing was the last thing to even pretend like it was a video game related aspect or element, and quite notably there's been no talk around ray tracing as it being a killer feature after it initially got pushed by Control and maybe a couple other games. And that definitely is going to be an example of ray tracing was just too new of a concept that in the second implementation, in the software implementations, instead of having to have hardware implementations, it's going to be more available and more usable. Alright, let's kind of quickly burn through the news from Video Games Chronicles. Some of these articles we've already talked about. Sucker Punch has said it has no plans to revisit Infamous or Sly Cooper series. The studio also claims that no other studio is working on this series, which effectively this might be one of the few arguments towards actually having another company buy out a company like Sucker Punch, because if there are IPs out there and they are just sitting because the companies are too small, being part of a subsidiary of a bigger company starts to make some sense. That being said, what tends to happen versus what you'd like to happen are different things. We have not seen, between Microsoft's acquisitions of companies, Microsoft greenlight or start development of any IP that was just sitting on the table from Bethesda or Double Fine or anything like that. Now, maybe in secret those are being worked on, and certainly nobody has gotten the right person to interview at Microsoft to say, hey, are you working on a new Brutal Legend game at Double Fine, for instance? That would be one question to ask, certainly. But yeah, you would like to hope that somewhere there is maybe one person working on a new Brutal Legend game, or a Brutal Legend remake or something, to try and sell it a second time and revitalize the IP. That being said, Sucker Punch, I think, is owned already by Sony Interactive Entertainment, in part or in whole. So it's maybe more of a case that these it may be more of a case that Sony Interactive Entertainment owns Sucker Punch and just doesn't care that they're not working on an Infamous game, when really they should be, and they should be making a Sly Cooper game. Those are games that should be always in development as back pocket concepts. It might be that Infamous comes off as a Spider-Man wannabe, but that would be fairly okay, because you'd still be playing as a somewhat more bad guy character and more edgy character than you would as Miles Morales or Peter Parker. It's like Cooper is its own thing and has no real competition. And Sony certainly needs more kid-friendly looking games, even if Sly Cooper isn't actually supposed to be kid-friendly. Yeah, there is arguably a problem in the way things are built, in the way capitalism works, I guess, in that you have companies that are fairly successful. Infamous was fairly successful. Sly Cooper has been fairly successful, and yet there is not as much motivation as capitalistic theory would say there should be to make more. And I guess that probably in video games is highlighted in the fact that video games aren't really a need, so there isn't a consistent demand for video games in the same way that water and food aren't needed, and there will always just be demand for food and water. It might also be a case of companies just having so much money that they are no longer hungry. That is the argument, certainly, that is made against workers all the time, is that they need to be impoverished, they need to be underpaid, They need to be slightly hungry, because if they were well fed and happy, they wouldn't go to their jobs and work. Same, if that's true for workers, which arguably maybe it isn't true. It should be true for corporations too, that they shouldn't have millions of dollars in stocks or in valuation that lets them sit around and do nothing. And I'm talking, of course, specifically about the corporation as an entity, not so much the workers in video game offices, because they clearly are being overworked in almost every instance universally. It probably has a lot more to do with keeping the number of employees down as to why they're not making an infamous or Sly Cooper series. Like, if they had to hire more people to work on 2 games, they don't want to do that. That also might lead to them hiring bad programmers who make a bad game. So you could almost understand that argument. But one way or the other, that's what they're going to have to do. Is they're going to have to either hire a third-party developer to completely separately work on a new Infamous or Sly Cooper game, or hire more internal staff if they were going to make those kinds of games and they didn't have the staff already. Oh man. If I could just script the action of summoning all of these, it would make playing this deck so much faster. Moving on, since I've literally gone through one story so far, and I told you already I needed to rush. It's been an hour, and I'm not really rushing. Sega says it will match employee donations to Planned Parenthood. The company is in the latest in a series of developers throwing support behind abortion rights. Interesting that a Japanese company would bother to speak on that aspect. Japanese feminism certainly is a different thing, and frankly, just like women's rights and sexism in Japan is a different thing in general. I'm not sure if there are like any kind of abortion restrictions that are particularly restrictive in Japan. I think Japan's desire for privacy probably leaves it fairly open. Japan's declining health rate also, I think, might play a role, but probably not that much. It's not really a case where Japanese women are out there getting abortions all over the place. It's more a case that Japanese men and women aren't dating and getting pregnant in the first place. Let's just cancel that. There's nothing we can do there. I could certainly be a little bit cruel on Sega and say, well, why aren't you just donating money? Why are you matching employee donations? Why are you asking your employees to take money that out of their own paycheck that you know you're not paying them that much? It does seem seem like an odd system to set up. Anytime you have somebody saying, I'll match your donation, that really does feel like that is a gamble and a challenge more than anything. Maybe it gives Sega an out to say, hey, well, of our employees, only our employees only donated $10,000, so we only donated $10,000. Therefore, we just echoed the feelings and sentiments of our employees without actually making a stance or any bigger show of support by even a penny. And that might be the idea, certainly. But yeah, it definitely leaves a bitter taste in my mouth anytime I see a big corporation say, we'll match your donations, or we'd like you to donate through us so we can get the tax write-offs. For corporations, it is tax write-offs, if not just good PR. But yeah, it is definitely a continued narrative, and seems to be fairly obviously accurate, that almost every single video game company in the world is going to be more pro-choice, and almost every single video game employee who's going to speak out about it is going to be pro-choice. So it's an oddly safe bet for a topic that many people would say is a lot more controversial than that. Right. Moving on to the next story. Sony Santa Monica has issued a statement calling for, quote, respect following online abuse. Quote here is, ... passion should not be toxic nor come from at the expense of any human being's dignity. The phrase toxic always thrown around as something that's fairly undefinable. Human beings' dignity also kind of hard to define, certainly. This is part of this continued narrative that is being pushed, that God of War fans are becoming rabid and unwilling to wait and being mean to the creator of God of War Ragnarok. And it all just boils down to their own darn fault for advertising a game they weren't ready to announce, for intentionally hyping up an audience on a game. They've created this problem in general, and now they're pushing the blame off of themselves, if there really is even a problem. Like I said in the previous recording, every time we get a story here like this, the news sites don't do any real journalism, so they can't show you even a single mean tweet, or a percentage of how many tweets are mean, or anything like that. Yeah, the entire subtext after this top part is, developers reportedly received abuse on social media, no evidence provided. And then below the fold, one female developer tweeted that some users have been sending her unsolicited explicit images and asking her for the game's release date, which were those done by the same person at the same time? And how many people did that? And what is the unsolicited explicit image? Like, you're getting trolled because you're a big YouTube, Twitter personality, or you're somebody of importance. That's just kind of how it goes. And at a certain level, as a small YouTube personality, I'd almost kill for being trolled. Like, if every single one of my YouTube videos got 20 people coming into the comments and just putting super mean, super explicit posts, I mean, they'd probably get their accounts banned on YouTube, certainly. But if they just put something like "you suck" 20 times on every single one of my videos, I'd be like, oh, yay, engagement. What? Why would I really care about that? Why would I whine to a news press about internet trolls being internet trolls? It's just the price of success. I'm sure George Lucas would have loved it to be able to make it so Star Wars fans couldn't criticize his movies and his odd decisions around the Star Wars movies. In fact, this is basically exactly what George Lucas tried to do, is complain about the fans over and over again, and it really just highlighted how thin-skinned and childish and pathetic George Lucas was, at least to some aspect. But yeah, I'm sorry, I really have become completely callous and numb to any complaints about people being harassed in the video game industry. Like, until you have people lining up at your front door, until you're finding bags of poop on your front door or worse, until you have people protesting outside your house, you really are not experiencing any legitimate form of abuse or harassment. And yeah, that's really where I would say the line is gonna start. Like, until somebody's slashing your tires, until somebody's keying your car, until there's flaming bags of poop on your front door, until somebody's TP jaws, until somebody's actually physically bothered to go and do something physically with you, it should just be sticks and stones can't break my bones. I mean, it's a stupid old-fashioned rhyme that apparently adults need to hear again. Because, yeah, I don't think I'm just being stubborn and old in that, but we as the past few generations, we've gone from sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, to words hurt, and words are just as violent and hurtful as actions, and they should be banned, and we should have censorship. And I'm like, oh, these precious snowflakes. I mean, what else can I say? And I really hate that I often come off more right-wing or more conservative way more than I really am, just because of how much liberal snowflakes, and that's not all liberals, just mostly the SJWs and the liberal snowflakes, which can be, I guess, different groups. Like, but they come off so bad. And it is in part, I think, both conservative and liberals' job to keep in check people who are just so far to the extremes, or so off the rails, or just so crazy, so that they don't look like they are being the endorsed representative of an entire group of people or an entire movement. Yeah. And what's funny, I would say, today, as we move on, it's funny that there really isn't that much news because of the July 4th weekend, holiday weekend. So I would have much preferred that previous story to just not have been posted. The people at Video Games Chronicle could have just taken the weekend off, although they are UK sites, so they're not going to celebrate 4th of July anyways. But they could have just taken the weekend off and not posted anything, and it would have been just as productive, if not more productive, than to repeat statements. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean it should be repeated, even by the news. You have to make the question about whether something is newsworthy all the time, and that is where you're going to inherently have some level of bias, whether you intend to or not. And what that bias may be could be anything. But yeah. A lot of what gets posted about video games is not newsworthy. And it would save a lot of people a lot of time to simply not bother to platform, for lack of a better term, unnewsworthy stories. Just because a company puts out a statement doesn't mean you need to report on that statement or echo it. Moving on though, eye tracking firm confirms that Sony has licensed its tech for the PlayStation VR. Players will likely be able to control game elements using just eye movement. I wouldn't be surprised if that works pretty badly. I personally have never been really able to control my eye movement, so I don't think that's too weird for most people. There's never been interfaces around that in the past, so nobody has any experience around that. And I imagine that would cause eye strain very, very quickly, and the VR already causes dizziness and eye strain. Sure, at a certain level, if you got it really, really subtle, maybe looking to the left would pan the screen to the left a little bit more so you could see, but that would be very disorienting anyways. You would still want to naturally just turn your head to the left to see something. So, yeah. I can't even think of a use in which eye tracking technology makes sense. Like, the worst case scenario is going to be gimmicky. It's going to be able to tell when you blink or close your eyes in a horror game. And I doubt you can program games to run smoothly if it's micro pausing every time you blink, so you see every single frame of the game. There is a danger there also, in that eye tracking technology of any kind may be tried to use to force you to look at advertisements, which that's really where it's going to be offensive, is it's going to pop up an ad, and if you try to close your eyes, it's going to pause the ad. Or if it's tried to be used for medical diagnoses, where the PlayStation VR 2 might say, hey, your eyes are darting around a lot, we think you have ADHD. Or your eyes are moving very slowly, we think you have a concussion. Something like that. Or your pupils are dilated, we think you're lying. Or you're anxious, or something like that. Like, the nefarious Twilight Zone outcomes around eye tracking are much higher than legitimate good uses for eye tracking. It's going to turn into that game in Star Trek The Next Generation that brainwashed all the crew. Yeah. And inherently, you run into this issue where eye tracking is not an interesting sales pitch as a feature, and PlayStation VR does not really visually look like or have any features that feel any different from PlayStation VR 1. So, like the grips I think are different and the controls are different, yes. And the headset obviously will be improved, but there's still not anything that really makes you want to strap one of these things to your head and try and play this. Almost certainly VR will become a thing in a PlayStation in the future. If they came out with a PlayStation 6 and it was VR always, and the controls were always the VR controls, then that's when you might start to see some major adoption, and then that's when you might start to see enough development around games that there are actually good VR games in general. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the writer behind Deus Ex has joined BioWare. Mary DeMarle, no B there, led narrative on modern Deus Ex games and the Guardians of the Galaxy games. Okay. I haven't played the Guardians of the Galaxy games, and I've only played Deus Ex I don't think I played Mankind Divided. I think I played Human Revolution, which would have been the oldest Deus Ex game. And on Human Revolution, I don't feel like the writing was that great. It was just kind of cyberpunk feel and cyberpunk missions. But I did hear good word around Guardians of the Galaxy, so okay. The thing to take from this, though, is one company hiring a writer that worked with other companies isn't that odd. Like, the writer is probably the one employee that is involved in making a video game that actually works on the game for the least amount of time. You can have the general narrative done halfway through the game, a third of the way through the development of the game. The programming takes a lot more time. I won't say it's harder, but it probably is harder, considering the number of people that have to work on programming compared to one writer. Writers certainly could work up to the last second and have the narrative turned in just before the game is released, but it tends not to be the case. It's fairly easy to have the writing done and squeeze it in around the rest of the gameplay elements. And we certainly saw kind of a similar issue with that being a problem, in that the writer for Half-Life 3 and Portal 2 and all in Half-Life 2, he had a script for Half-Life 3 that he published after he stopped working for Valve. But yeah, that guy was on Valve's payroll basically just to keep him busy for years, it felt like. And if Valve wasn't just overflowing with cash, they definitely would have released him from his commission or his contractor, as a contractor or as a full-time employee. I'm not sure what he was. He probably was an independent contractor. But yeah, he definitely had stories and ideas for Portal 3, Half-Life 3, and Valve had no interest in actually successfully making a Portal 3 or Half-Life 3. Let's see, moving on. Modern Warfare 2 map images have seemingly been leaked via the Call of Duty Warzone mobile. If you're interested, check out that article. Concept art for Call of Duty Black Ops 5 has reportedly appeared online. Again, if you're interested, check out that article. Summer Games Done Quick concluded with $3.01 million raised for charity. This was Doctors Without Borders again. I feel like they have really locked in to just always doing Doctors Without Borders for Summer Games Done Quick, or if not all the Games Done Quick events. 3 million, it's a lot certainly, but it doesn't feel like it's as much as it would have been. This is also the first in-person one of these they've done since Awesome Games Done Quick 2020, so it's been a couple years. It does seem like they got a picture of at least a decent number of people in an audience. I haven't really watched any of these. When they announced Summer Games Done Quick, I said the problem with the Games Done Quick series is that they've just really run out of games, and so they are now kind of cycling back to the same games over and over again, and that has made it particularly boring because they just don't have any more small indie games that people are trying to speedrun. So they have a video for everything, and you can see here they're linking to like Portal 2. I've probably seen at least 4 or 5 speedruns of Portal 2, and like most speedrunners, a lot of these speedruns are glitching through walls and doing tricks, so you're not even really experiencing the game anywhere close to the way it was intended to be experienced. And at that point it's like the any percent runs tend to be very boring compared to the 100% runs, or the runs that are all chapters. Honestly, all chapters as a run probably is better than even 100%, because some games you could get 100% of all the collectibles and still use a ton of glitches and not really see the whole content. Yep. Let's see, if we clicked on their YouTube channel, let's see if I could see what videos they did, because this is about the most complete way to do this would be to be on their YouTube page, which nobody looks at YouTube pages online, and you can see they're just kind of on the hour putting out a new video in the archive. So they have like an Elden Ring, and then Final Fantasy X-10, Metal Gear Solid 2, Super Meat Boy, another Elden Ring, Pokemon Shining Pearl, Mario 64, Super Mario 64, a modded game called Kaizo Super Metroid, then Metroid Dread, Mario All-Stars, and Super Mario World with Seth Bling, who used to be a Minecraft player, now really a speedrunner. Wind Waker, The Legend of the Zelda, The Wind Waker, Left 4 Dead 2. I assume that's Wind Waker and not some mod. Noticeably, there's quite a few Nintendo games here, but I don't think Nintendo really appreciates modded games being shown side by side. I'm just gonna end here, so I should just end the turn and lose. Slowly trying to work my way up the ranks here, and failing pretty miserably. Yeah, unless this could lead to this. Yeah, if I could destroy that... Maybe that would do something, but nope. That didn't do anything, so I've lost. Let's just end the turn. Yeah, Left 4 Dead, Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, Super Mario World, Celeste SMC, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Portal 2, Tool Assisted Speedrun, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time again, F-Zero, Donkey Kong Country, Pokemon Shining Pearl, Chocobo GP, Satisfactory. That one is maybe one I'd want to watch in 22 minutes. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon is new. I think Magic Trick might be new. ATO might be new. This is probably the smaller games block here. This game, Elisa, might be something new. Happy Humble Burger Farm is new. Lumina Ranger. Stepmania might be new. But then you're back to some pretty AAA games like Control, then Doom Eternal, then Borderlands 2, then Celeste again. They seem to have been very willing to let 2 or 3 people play the same game. So even they know that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Sound verdicts exceeded Gear, Metal Gear Revengeance, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, Monster Hunter Rise in an hour, which that might be interesting to look at to just see how can you do that. Solar Ash is probably new. Slime Rancher, this might be the first time we've seen a Slime Rancher. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Kirby Tilt and Tumble. You can also see how they have some pretty awful thumbnails that they're really not trying for much of anything on YouTube, and they still get decent numbers of views, in the thousands. This one has 40,000, where this one has only 3,000 with bad thumbnails, and that really goes to highlight the success. Once a channel is successful, it's just constantly successful, as long as they don't do something horrible. A Little Mermaid NES game, it looks like. King's Quest V, that might be worth watching. Incredible Crisis, Thunder in Paradise. Oh, that's an FMV game. You don't get that very often. Gourmet Warriors, Jimmy Johnson's Anything with an Engine, Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, Me Scoozy, Deer Simulator, Your Average Everyday Deer Game, Devil May Cry, Banjo Tooie, Super Mario Sunshine, Minecraft Java Edition, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, Pokemon Emerald. Pokemon games in particular are weird. Tunic, Sonic Advance, Sonic Adventure, Knuckles. There was clearly a Sonic block. Power Slave. Some of these also, though, are like super short. Power Slave Exhumed, 28 minutes in total as speedruns, so you could easily have 2 or 3 of these in an hour over the course of a 3 or 4 day event. It probably is to the point where if there were slightly more games, you would have 2 stages always going. And I'm not sure that they're always doing that, or if they ever do that, because then you would need twice the number of commentaries, twice the number of locations. And there's definitely a danger here in that some of these might have been posted 5 days ago, but be part of a different event. So we'd have to keep an eye out for this lower left icon. It is a lot of games. So, I may have to take back my words. It may not really be a case that they've run out of games. It may just be a case that they are incredibly bad at advertising, particularly on their YouTube channel, the games that they present, because they're making a very basic mistake here in that they are putting out more than 2 new videos a day, and the YouTube algorithm absolutely will not notify people after the second notification or the third notification. Maybe you get a third notification, but that does create this problem where over the course of this 7 days, I've seen only 3 or 4 of these videos in my subscriptions feed, when there's clearly been a lot more. And you can see at this point, this is 8 days ago, how to train a speedrunner time shift. This is their extra content, which if you look at this number of views at 5,000 compared to this 45,000, you definitely are getting more views around the Summer Day Games Done Quick. But I think also in part that they were doing pretty decently, showing speedruns via work from home effectively, and just via like Discord or whatever the other face streaming software, where it would just be one commentator. Before this event, it was just like one commentator talking off screen and one speedrunner in his own house streaming. But I definitely would say I liked the layout more here than the layout of the thumbnail. But that's not really comparing apples to apples. The layout here is really not that different from the layout here. It's the same general idea, it's just they've changed the art slightly. But yeah, it definitely feels like if there's a game that's even decently liked, in less than a week it was getting 20-30,000 views, and then they started to lose some views as they continued to flood the Steam, the YouTube algorithm with content. And certainly I am not exempt from that criticism. I'm definitely guilty of flooding YouTube with content. And when you have the content, there really is nothing you can do about that either. And yeah, as you start to scroll up here and look at the views, there are popular games that can get quite a few, but then there's also a lot that are barely getting anything. Although I would gladly take 5,000 views minimum on every single one of my videos. That would be more than enough. Super Mario World is at 61,000 views. And they don't even care about the views. They don't mention it or anything like that. But yeah. They need to figure out a different way for YouTube needs to figure out a different way to present that kind of content. Because it is crazy to say the least that they're losing 20-30,000 views. I think that they could be getting on every single video if they just put up those videos 1 or 2 a day. It would also buy them some buffer time, certainly, if the streams and the pre-recorded footage was not just put up immediately after, but if you really thought about it and said, let's put the most popular things out on like Monday, and let's stagger it and try to get big bumps of attention every week until the next event. I would also say it's easy to have footage when you have other content creators working for you effectively. giving away the rights to their footage for games done quick. I'm just going to continuously try to ruin this guy's strategy. Moving on from that little investigation, I actually did some investigative journalism there to some small amount. Here's the first Pac-Man title World Repack gameplay, which, okay. Do I really care enough to watch the gameplay? I don't really think I do. Like, if this game comes out and it's somewhat well received, I'll definitely consider getting it as a kid-friendly game, and that's really my only interest, is that it would be potentially a kid-friendly game. But yeah, that's about the only interest I would have there. Yeah, I think at this point I'm going to have to say this is the last game because I didn't need to rush. I'm just looking at the clock now. So yeah. It looks like if this is a remake of the previous game, it looks fine. If this is a brand new twist or a reboot of the previous Pac-World games, it's maybe a little less polished than I'd like, but it's not terrible. Let's see. EA's new Seattle studio is hiring for the next Battlefield single-player campaign. Which, okay. Let's take this. And then summon this. Alright, so I want this to activate. So I can discard this. And then I guess I want to activate this just to get rid of it anyways. And that will let me destroy these cards. Send that to the graveyard. Yeah, I'm getting a little sleepy, and now is definitely not the time for me to start to get sleepy. Well, that managed to kill everything. That worked out way better than I had anticipated. Like, I am actually shocked that I managed to get rid of all of his cards, and I suspect something might be up. Honestly, I'm paranoid at this point that there is another thing going on here. Yeah, that didn't do anything. honestly, it probably should be in the order that you do things. Probably should be to summon the third zoo character, then the first one, then the fourth one, then the second one. Moving on, we need to burn through this. EA's new Seattle studio is hiring for the next Battlefield single-player campaign, which I guess that's good news that there is going to be a single-player campaign of some sort. 6 Dutch political parties have united behind a proposed loot box ban. Quote, children are manipulated into making microtransactions, the new motion claims. It's believable. I totally think children are manipulated. A Sony patent suggests that PS3 era peripheral compatibility could come to the PS5. The PSP Go, the iToy, and the DualShock 3 all featured in the new filings. I think it's hard to believe that they would actually act on that patent. This may very well just be Sony applying for a patent for patent protection. Doesn't mean they have to actually do anything there. And I just don't feel like that hardware exists around enough that you would need to add that kind of compatibility. Yeah. Actually, that hardware probably does sit around in Japan, so maybe there is some level in which Japanese people have PlayStation 3s still and a bunch of accessories for PS3, and they'd like to be able to get more backward compatibility that way. But yeah, I wouldn't really hold my breath on that one. An archivist has made every English language Super NES manual available online. More than 840 manuals can now be accessed from one site. It's a shame Nintendo didn't do this themselves, and it's a shame that this almost certainly is going to get DMCA that are going to try and take it down. But yeah, I would definitely say there's room for that. That is something that I think the RetroPie and the Retro Emulation Station and RetroArch should take the next step. Like, people people that already have like ROMs or a way to play every single old game are going to now want that next step of being able to experience looking at the manuals, particularly since a lot of games actually needed you to look at the manuals for copy protection reasons or just for instruction reasons. Darn it. Messed up there. Well, whatever. I needed to have banished this card first, and then I could have attacked. It would have done the same thing, but it would have at least banished the card. Let's see, moving on, the Intellivision Amico's trademark changed to abandoned in the latest sign it may never release. The trademark was abandoned after Intellivision failed to file a statement of use. Interesting. I didn't realize that the trademark office would use a phrase like abandoned, but I guess that makes some sense. I don't think they're using the exact phrase abandoned when you actually look here. It says dead application, refused, dismissed, or invalidated. Here it says abandoned because no statement of use extension. But yeah, that is yet another bit of evidence that they don't know what they're doing, this new Intellivision company, this scam company. I think it's a scam company in my opinion. Diablo Immortal apparently is making more than $1 million per day despite its criticism, which that's a sad statement around how the game industry really can go for mobile games and microtransactions. Nintendo has revealed plans to protect its game development from earthquake disaster. The company assures that any in-development games wouldn't be lost. Earthquake is probably smart to have, but tsunami is probably the bigger one that would actually damage. Basically, this is Nintendo doing. They probably were asked to reveal these kinds of plans during their shareholders meeting. Either that, or this is an example of Nintendo having nothing better to do with their time, so they put out this statement. But yeah, I would definitely say that I wouldn't really worry too much about Nintendo's in-development games and a natural disaster. If any natural disaster happens, it's going to affect anyone and everyone so much that it'll be the last thing on people's minds. Like, we've had the whole COVID pandemic for 2 years, and I don't for a second feel like it was the COVID pandemic's fault that there were not as many Nintendo games released as I would like. I would 100% say that was just Nintendo's fault. Like, I think in general Nintendo is just not really trying to release as many games as they might. This guy is just going all over the place. I guess Nintendo's headquarters, being based in Kyoto, did receive a 4.4 and a 4.3 earthquake in the past few months, so that may have actually convinced them that for the need to put out this statement. The real question though is, like, what can you really do? You can have as earthquake proof a building as you can build, which isn't that earthquake proof. You can have backup facilities for your code and your computers, certainly, but anything physical is going to be harder to duplicate. If there's a big tsunami that floods most of Japan, or most of the, at least, business areas of Japan, there's not too much you can do there. if there's a pandemic that affects everybody in Japan, there's not much you can do there. So it does kind of feel like much ado about nothing. Moving on, the first NFT game console has been announced. The Polonium 1 will allegedly be released in 2024, but as revealed, has been met with some criticism. It looks like a fine, like PlayStation style controller, with a puck console type idea, but throwing in the blockchain definitely doesn't feel good. I doubt there's a touch pad there that would add more functionality. Certainly it's going to be a question as to just how many games you could get to be on that kind of console, because even if Google or Amazon were to put out a new console, which they've already kind of tried those, their services inevitably fail because they just can't get any games. Nobody wanted to do Amazon Lua, nobody wants to do Stadia, and definitely nobody wants to do NFTs, anythings. There is something to this idea that this brings to my idea, is that if you could make a console where the top of the console had the controller snap in and be securely held, or if there was a lid that went on top of it that snapped in and securely held the controller on top of it, that would be kind of nice for like a portable system. Like the Nintendo Switch already does that, of course, but yeah, when you do think about an Xbox or a PlayStation, the controls have really no homes. They just sit around on the table, which is probably where they'd end up anyways, but it would be nice if there was some way to make it all look nice and all shippable and packable. And that may even, at some level, get rid of some like shipping materials, some packing peanuts, some cardboard used to ship different components. Oh man, I am definitely feeling a little dizzy and exhausted now at this point. Yeah, the summer heat is really killing me, but it also just really sucks that so many of these streams in the past month or two have been like this. Andrew Murphy's on the chat. He says yo. I'll say yo back. Come on, just let me win. Yeah, and on that win, that'll be the last game we cover for today. Alright. I think that'll probably be some decent progress as far as daily quests go. Yep. We claim all of those. I'll get rid of everything. And then we have some more things in ranked in solo mode. It definitely feels like the duel in solo mode 3 times is something you should just wait until there's 1 day left and then do. Then we need to do a duel live speculation. And look at that too. And yeah, we're getting more and more gems. And I decided in the last stream that it is worth it just to open up 10 of these and skip, and then we can see we still are getting a decent amount of new cards by opening legacy packs that way. Of course, the problem here is you're either going to have something like Dark Eyes Illusionist that you already know, so I know this card, I recognize it, or you're going to have something you just have no idea about, and then I'm just going to click forward and not even read it. Even having 20 cards to look through is just too much at the end of a stream to deal with. So I'm really just kind of showing off cards and then immediately forgetting about the cards, and then at some point I would come to the deck and try to edit the collection of cards to just see. If we dismantle all extra cards, there's oddly not a single extra card that I have. And we have some decent amounts of crafting points, but not quite enough for it to make sense. And then if we were to look at all the cards that exist, and then sort by the number owned going up, that lets us effectively scroll down to a point where we can see what percentage by scroll bar are we at. Yeah, we are here. So we've got at best 1/3 of all the cards available, and 2/3 of the cards are missing, and we don't have a single one of those. And then if we were to start to get even deeper into that concept, we would have to scroll quite far down. Alright. Scroll to this point here, where we have 2 copies of the cards. Remember, you can have usually 3 copies, and to get the 3s, it's just a tiny little sliver. So we really aren't anywhere. We really aren't anywhere close to having all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel cards, which is fine. I'm not really expecting to have all the cards anytime soon, but it would also still be nice if they would add some new cards. That is one thing Konami has failed to do so far. We got a few more levels here. They have not added a single card since the Master Duel collection. Andrew Murphy goes, "How's it doing, dude? How's it going, dude?" is what he said, if I can read. It's going pretty good, but I need to rush today because I have 4th of July party I'm supposed to go to, so I'm in a rush here. So we had the article about the world's first NFT console being announced, and we also now have a Video Games Chronicle article saying NFT sales plunged to a 12-month low in June. Monthly sales total just over $1 billion, down from $12.6 billion in January. I hope this is not the beginning of a pattern in which Video Games Chronicles now starts talking about NFTs all the time. If they do, I am going to make a personal promise to censor those articles out, because they're not really relevant. I don't feel like NFTs were ever really relevant, and I don't think they ever will be. Next, we are moving on to the Gematsu articles. We already talked about that. Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sin has a short trailer and screenshot. Check out Gematsu if you're interested. Alice Gear Age of CS Consorter of Similar Tracks customization trailer is available if you want to check that out. I don't think this game is gonna be much of a big deal. Megaton Musashi goes free to play as Megaton Musashi X this fall in Japan, which I guess that heavily implies that the first Megaton Musashi game, the first launch of it didn't really succeed if it's going free to play. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Japanese games start to go free to play and start to go more towards mobile consoles, as they don't really care about the PlayStation 5 and the Switch is getting older and older. Let's see, Shinigami Shibito Magiri has been delayed to December 1st, no longer throughout September 15th in Japan. It would be weird, certainly, if this came to the West, to use the phrase Shinigami, because we only really know Shinigami as the gods of death in Death Note, and it seems fairly obvious that this visual novel is not some spin-off of Death Note, or at least it doesn't look like that to me. So yeah, they'd probably translate that literally. Digimon's 5 gameplay trailer and screenshots are available, but I've pretty much already seen so much gameplay that I know I'm not really interested in playing the game, which is a shame. I kind of would like to do the story part of Digimon Survive and not do any of the RPG elements. And that might be a way to sell some JRPGs in the West, is just remove the RPG grind and just have it be more like a Telltale game. You could make a Western company to try and repackage and relicense games, although I bet the artists would hate that if you changed their art by that much. Moving on, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, Parts 4, 6, and 8 trailers, which I assume these are trailers around different parts of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure manga/anime. Which, yeah. I'm still, when you look at the crazy art style of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or the crazy way the story goes in JoJo's, as I've casually just glanced at it, I'm surprised how popular it is. But that isn't really out of the norm. It does tend to be that the weirder stories, the weirder pieces of art catch people's attention. People are never really that happy around a mushy middle experience where it's just average and forgettable. They want things to stand out. We'd already talked about this. The Sucker Punch Productions says no Infamous or Sly Cooper games are in development, plus no other companies are working on them either. Phantasy Star Online 2 and Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis for PS4 is coming to the West on August 31st. I imagine there's probably a niche audience that are really hyped around that announcement. Ruby Arrowfell launches this fall, gameplay trailer and screenshots. I am surprised that Ruby is even something anybody would try to do anything with. That being said, this probably is being published by Rooster Teeth Games themselves, and so to promote their own series Ruby. Yeah. No, apparently Way Forward is publishing it. Yeah. It's a shame Ruby is not kind of better made. It wasn't written better. It wasn't released faster. It wasn't polished visually as much as it should have been. It definitely is this also-ran series, as far as I can tell, that many people have never even heard of, when it really should be a Western cartoon that is on Cartoon Network or Toonami, and something that lots of people watched and lots of people enjoyed, and there are people that have watched it and enjoyed it, but it's never gained the audience it probably should have, or the success it should have had. I just don't think it had the budgeting and the funding for it. Moving on, My Hero's Ultimate Rumble is coming to... My Hero Ultra Rumble is coming to the West. PS4 closed beta test signups are now available. Like, in a lot of ways, Ruby should be as popular as like My Hero Academia or I want to say Yu-Gi-Oh, but that's not what I'm talking about. Naruto, yeah. Like, it is in that same style of a fighting show, and the difference is just Bandai Namco, I believe, having the funding behind My Hero Academia as a series, as an anime series, as a manga, and they're just being Japanese animators that can actually animate, where Ruby's animation is pretty rough at times, from what I hear. I watched like a 2-hour like recap on the entire history of Ruby at some point, and yeah, it was pretty critical. Let's see, Doraemon's Story of Seasons, Friends of the Great Kingdom demo has been announced, according to Komatsu. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R Eat Your Heart Out trailer has been announced. This is a trailer of, I guess, the 3 female characters from one of the arcs of JoJo's. I think this is the most recent arc to have come out on Netflix. Sword Art Online Alicization Lycross is coming to the Switch, which is a little interesting. It would come to the Switch, but not super surprising either. If anything, it looks fairly nicely animated for what it is. And let's see. Yeah, this is that weird series of Sword Art Online where there's this like naked goddess for several episodes that he's fighting. And they showed her for a brief second there. They showed her head. Yeah, it is yet another weird spin-off of Sword Art Online, which does not seem to really stay connected to one narrative or one story, and loves to jump around. Apparently the Switch version will include the Ancient Apostles content updates, whatever those are. Let's see, Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher is coming to the West in 2022, which I am shocked by that. That's almost certainly something I wouldn't expect to come to the West. My question, I guess, here, though, is this a real Monster Rancher game, or is this some crossover game? Because it really looks more like it's a crossover game that's not quite a Monster Rancher game, and I have no idea if it really is supposed to be an Ultra Kaiju, what an Ultra Kaiju game would be like anyways. Yeah, seems like it's mostly Ultra Kaiju with some small concepts of emerging monsters from Monster Rancher. It's a digital only release, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's fairly small and just like an eShop thing. Well, I guess it would be an eShop thing. Genshin Impact has yet another update launching July 13th. We get too many of those announcements, but it is nice to see at least one mobile game is supporting its community and adding more content. Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisikai has some gameplay, Renee combat, Martian garden, hacking, and fishing, if you wanted to check out that video. Yeah. There's not a lot going on with the mobile game that I'm I'm still playing, Destiny Child, the lewd mobile gacha game. Um, it's having another event because it's always having an event, but mostly I'm just being overwhelmed with my battery dying on my cell phone and other problems where I'm just not getting all of the things, the daily quests done. Yeah, but nothing's really special happening there. The Diofield Chronicle launches September 22nd, and the demo launches August 10th. I do suspect, as Project Nikkei from the same developer is about to be released, we may very quickly start to see a wrap up of Destiny Child's story. It feels like it could be wrapped up fairly well in a year or two and just be done with it. Let's see. Monochrome Mobius, Rights and Wrongs, Forgotten Gameplay Trailer, 12 minutes of gameplay. This is the first time I've heard of this game. Looks like it's an open world RPG, turn-based RPG. These JRPGs really have figured out how to put a lot of polish into a lot of redundant and repetitive content, and I have to applaud them for that, but I also kind of hate JRPGs for it, because if there was actually a story in Monochrome Mobius that I was interested in seeing, the JRPG elements would almost certainly drive me away from it, and I would be uninterested after a couple hours. Ni no Kuni 1, which I covered, recorded a month ago or so, definitely ran into that problem where I was very much hoping that Ni no Kuni 1 would be interesting all the way through, and it just got very grindy and very boring. Let's see, Pups and Purrs Pet Shop is coming to the West in 2023, which, okay, hopefully that's a good game, because I'm always trying to find more kid-friendly games, and this definitely feels like this could be a kid-friendly game. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a slight percentage of fewer people with pets in this generation, as it's just extra money, certainly, to have a pet, to feed a pet, to take care of a pet. Let's see. Moving on, Access Games and Dreamloop Games announced a social thriller called Inescapable for basically every console and PC. It feels a lot like 999 in that it would be a visual novel type experience with a bunch of fairly unique looking characters. I mean, you take a look here, and every person, it has a wild anime fashion style going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is that everybody is trapped in some kind of death game. It does kind of feel like you might move around a little bit more when you look in the background here. So, might be more of a interactable environment than your standard visual novel, or it might not. It may very well be that these characters are just like chess pieces and they just move from one room to the next room. But it definitely feels like it is going to be one of those long-running visual novels. And I imagine the trailer here is going to be of no real help. I'm noticing that the names seem to be fairly Western names. So it oddly seems like this English version has already translated everything. They are calling it an adventure, though. Noticeably, it's not being labeled as a visual novel, which is definitely more what I was expecting. Like, you look at each of these screenshots and it feels like a visual novel. But then you also look at the font size and the font style. Um, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of text per screen. So maybe they're going to focus less on that. A game called Norn 9 Ver Commons and Norn 9 Last Era for the Switch is coming to the West in 2023. I have to assume that these are visual novels. Yeah, they were Otome Young Maiden visual novels. There is something that I think may be happening, which may prove me to be just an idiot and wrong about my theory completely about adult games being limited to being released over the weekend every 2 weeks. When I go through the curator's post, I often do see Western adult games that are completely uncensored in the screenshots, which I disagree with that. But I don't see them on What's on Steam. So it may very well be that What's on Steam and the API that What's on Steam is using is filtering out Western adult games, because we almost never see those. Or there's some other kind of trick happening in which they don't show up on What's on Steam. But I need to do more research. I need to find some time to do some more research, because it very well may be that I need to find a different source of when games are listed than What's on Steam, even though I don't think anything like that exists, to get a better confirmation. Because it might very well be that there are Western adult games getting released all the time on Steam, and that they are just not showing up because of the way I am looking. And that may very well mean that particularly the Japanese adult games, which seem to not be getting released at all, may be getting released, and I may just be missing them. And at a certain point, that's always been the risk of What's on Steam, or using What's on Steam, is that that I could be only seeing a percentage or a subset of categories of games that are being released. It's a big enough subset, though, otherwise. And as far as the daily PC game shorts, which I'm still experimenting with, I can't put adult games on that anyways, because of my software, and I imagine YouTube wouldn't enjoy that in any ways anyway. So yeah, any kind of adult game or age restricted game is gonna not show up on the daily PC games. Moving on, as I'm desperately trying to burn through this. Radiant Tales is coming to the West in 2023. This is another Otome visual novel, Young Maiden visual novel. Shuen no Verche Arrow Salvation is coming to the West in 2023. I assume another Otome visual novel. Almost certainly all from Axis Games or Idea Factory, so they just announced like 3 games at the same time. 3 or more. Shinigami Shibito Majuri coming to the West as Spirit Hunter Deathmark 2 in 2023. So they are changing the title, getting away from Shinigami. It's a horror visual novel. It's age restricted. Let's see. A Light in the Dark is coming to the PS4 and Switch this fall. It's a visual novel. Also, looks like it might have a slightly different art style. I kind of want to check this out, but I'm also running incredibly behind. Yep. It looks like a visual novel. Let's see. Chaos Head Noah is coming to PC on October 7th. Due out alongside a Western release of Chaos Head Noah and Chaos Child Double Pack for the Switch. This probably is... no, it's a visual novel. I was thinking this one might be a JRPG. And then our last Gematsu article says Anonymous Code is coming to the West 2020 and 2023 for PS4, Switch, and PC. which, okay, that too is a visual novel. So we have undoubtedly a lot of visual novels being announced, so we should see them. As for actual games that have come out on Steam, Famished Zombies looks a little bit better polished as an acid flip zombie shooter, but that's still all it is. Pop Goes Arcade. It looks like a collection of low effort mini games, so no to that. Notorious the Goblin War. Doesn't look visually polished enough. Junkyard War looks ugly. Big Flying Asteroid looks ugly and simplistic. Gun Quest, we're just trying to burn through this really quick. Gun Quest looks like a troll game, Oregon Trail. Troll game, joke game. I might, in a different mood, have given this more of a chance, but looking at it, it really doesn't look like enough of something. Bonza Boom is just a Worms clone, maybe with card game elements. I'll give that a follow, because I really don't want to make any decisions today. Does this one support English? No, this is a Chinese game of some sort. Falling Petals Bloom Edition. Chinese RPG game. You don't see a lot of RPG Maker 8-bit games that are Chinese only. They probably should go down that route some and just diversify the types of games they try to make. This looks like it's just a platformer game that's not quite visually polished enough. Here we have a student project from DigiPen, so I'll put that on the follow list. You can pretty much assume anything from DigiPen is a student project because DigiPen is a school. It probably says that somewhere here. Yep. What is interesting here, though, also is DigiPen Europe is the developer of this, so there are now multiple DigiPen schools apparently, whereas many decades ago there was only one DigiPen school. I think some of the big names like MIT also do something like that, where there's a school for specifically medicine or science or arts, different locations, and more than just having a different campus in the same city, having entirely different schools in entirely different cities or countries. DigiPen, I assume, always focuses and specializes around making games. Arguably, I would still say this game is just Minesweeper. I would say, though, I don't think game developers should go to DigiPen and specialize in that. Maybe you go to DigiPen for a bachelor's and then you specialize for a master's in some more general college, maybe MIT. But C++, C# programming at a good, well-known college is going to get you further in case you decide you don't want to program games than specializing as at DigiPen to just be able to program video games, and then it being very hard to potentially work on any other kind of software, because there's plenty of software jobs out there and most of them are better than video game programming jobs. It is very possible that you might find happiness working in a 10-hour-a-day job programming a game at work, programming some accounting software at work, and then spending a couple hours on the weekends just making your dream game as a hobby. And I say 10-hour-a-day job, and that's probably not even accurate. There almost certainly are some programming jobs out there where you are working 8 hours a day, just normal 40 hours a week. This is just a hidden object game, so I'm going to say no to that. Isekai starting in another world naked is a joke game with they just wanted naked in the name really. Notice how big it is. And isekai is not a word everybody recognizes as a Japanese another world type story. And clearly this is a low effort survival resource game. But yeah, being able to earn your bread or earn your money programming anything is almost certainly a better idea than specializing at Digipen. Not that specializing is always wrong, like you definitely have to specialize if you want to be a doctor or something like that, because being a GP versus being a brain surgeon will drastically change the type of work you do and the type of money you'll get. This game, Our Home, I'll put on the fall list. It might be something. It really doesn't look that good as a horror game. It's got some dark screenshot syndrome. But oddly, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel here, and because of that, I'm not finding a lot to even highlight for the daily PC games. Which, at some point, I shouldn't just get that desperate around it and just be willing to miss a couple of days. Crash Force 2 doesn't look interesting. Guacamojo. It's got some polish on it, but it's not quite there. Domino's 3D Simulator. I've seen better versions of this game, so I'd say no to that. Army of One War Worlds. I think this is probably a name confusion game, trying to seem like it's a big AAA game when it really isn't. Here we have one called Ukrainian Agent, which I wouldn't believe for a second if this was actually made by a Chinese or Russian company to launder money directly to Russia. So I definitely wouldn't buy that out of any kind of form of support of Ukraine. Donut Crab doesn't look that interesting. This looks like this might be a Chinese mobile game that's been poorly zoomed up. It says Chinese and Japanese. It might be a Japanese RPG, but you can definitely see it's a mobile game, and you can definitely see it's blurry, and that's a no. L Cars is just a light cycle clone done very poorly. Why even bother putting a game like that on Steam? A Toad Well Traveled. Looks like a platforming game. There might be something to that. That's kind of a cutesy arty story, but probably not. We have the Fantasy World of Mahjong Princess general version, which, so it's Mahjong with anime girls, but it's been censored. So then the question is there a uncensored version of this? Doesn't seem like there is. I'll just double check and see if there's another version. But yeah. Well, it does actually seem like there's a couple of versions of the game that came out May 11th. Yep. So May 11th, 2022. I can't show it, but there are screenshots of just pure nudity and sex around 1 versus 1 Mahjong. And so now they've just made a general version, but the adult only version is also on Steam. So that's interesting, and I can't begrudge them for censoring their game and trying to sell it a second time. I hope it's not because Steam is threatening to remove the original version. But yeah, if they want to make a general version, I don't think one-on-one Mahjong is particularly that interesting. And if you were going to go that route, you probably would want to completely change the anime waifu characters and not just censor out the most explicit stuff. But yeah, that is weird. Also, it certainly points out to what was I doing on May 11th that I didn't see that game before, because I definitely feel like I should have seen it. Yeah, I think I may be wrong. I think what's on Steam may just not be showing me adult versions of games. Anyways, moving on, we have a game here called Pull Slide Story, which looks like it's a water park simulator management game. Mega Mall Story, which looks like it's a mall simulator game. Seems like they put out multiple games. Cafe Nipo Nika, which, yeah, at this point you are dangerously close to flooding Steam, having 3 different releases. Ultimate Ninja Shooter, looks like nothing. Now, this Throwdown Boxing looks interesting to me. Now, the visuals are not great, the animation's not great, but I am desperately always looking for a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out type game. So if we can find that in Throwdown Boxing 2, that would be interesting. But Throwdown Boxing 1 is nowhere to be seen, or it's made by a different developer. It's a shame that this is the closest we get to a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out game, though. Like, several people have tried and all have failed to make a kind of rhythm boxing game. This is not visually polished quite enough. We have about 10 more games. Backrooms games, found footage. We can say no to immediately. Pog 8. Looks like nothing interesting. We have a simplistic kid looking game, but I don't think it's quite good enough. Bounder as a retro game. Yeah, I don't think there's anything here. This might be a very old game being re-released, but I don't recognize a game called Bounder, so I don't think it's relevant. Spider Bro. Looks like nothing. Fetus. Oh yeah, I guess that is an interesting thought here, is that we probably in the next couple of weeks will start to see some crazy low effort pro Roe versus Wade, pro choice or pro life games showing up on Steam, unless Steam and Valve are just going to censor that very much. But yeah, Jim the Spy here is not quite polished enough. But yeah, I imagine somebody will try to lean in on the controversy and sell games around that. Yeah, this flight simulator doesn't look terrible, so I'll give it a follow. And then Stream War, I don't think is even really an actual game. We already talked about this event. Let's see. The GameDeveloper.com article here says augmented reality game market might be stalling, which with Pokemon Go it goes the augmented reality game market, and so almost certainly yes, that is the case. There's a report that Bethesda employees won't receive Microsoft assistance for abortion-related travel care, which I'm sure they'll address that at some point. And this is Redfall, the screenshot. It's kind of easy to not know that since that game is not even out. It would have been better to use the screenshot showing Bethesda or showing Microsoft for that title. Spain is set to restrict the use of loot boxes in video games, according to GameDeveloper.com, which, yay, good. Dutch politicians also call for loot box regulations and potential bans. Each is hosting an indie bundle for abortion funds in aid of reproductive rights. Which, okay, so buy some games from itch to support that. And then Summit Games Done Quick raised over $3 million for Doctors Without Borders, which they don't even bother to mention that until you get to this point in the article. This is your typical video game article. Let's put 4 sentences and make it like it's 4 paragraphs. Alright. We have Summer and Mara as a game on the fall list, which this looks like a very nicely animated game, but I thought it was going to be a point and click adventure, but it looks like it's more of an adventure, summer adventure. Regardless, it's mostly positive, so it meets the rules. I feel like they changed the name on this because I think it originally was called One Summer in Mara. Still kind of a bad name though, because you have to assume people know Mara is a area and not the name of the main character, because then it gets very dirty very fast if Mara is the name of the main character and it's this little girl. Oops, I forgot. I have to click the control buttons. Ooh, so let's see, how do we fix that? We go to history, open that back up. Yeah. Because of my new system, a new plugin, I have to click the control button when I click the wishlist button, or it won't work. Here we have a game called Sumir, which meets the requirements as far as being mostly positive, so that can go into the wish list. Here we have one from 2020 that only has 2 user reviews, so I think that has to just leave the follow list. Yep, it's just not relevant enough, so that one has to go. Suits Absolute Power is reviewed very positively. Visually, I'd kind of say no to this, but it meets the requirements, so that'll go to the wish list. Then we have yet another game that has been removed from sale completely from Steam, so who knows. It probably had suicide in the name and may have been censored specifically for that, but probably not. Suicide for Him here from 2021 is probably a Yandere Simulator clone, but it's still early access, so I'll just leave it on the follow list. And at a certain point here, there's just no reason to even play a clone of Yandere Simulator, since Yandere Simulator itself is not ever coming out. Sugar Style. It's a Japanese visual novel. It's very positive, so I'll put it on the wish list. I don't know how many visual novels I'm really gonna cover though. Sudoku RPG is very positive, and I do like the idea there, certainly, of playing an RPG elements or adding RPG elements to Sudoku to make Sudoku more interesting. Sudoku Cats, on the other hand, is also another way to balance out Sudoku. There's one like YouTuber that puts out the normal Sudoku games on Steam, so finding some not made by that developer would be helpful. Sucker for Love Prelude, which is a prelude, so it shouldn't be on the follow list really. Just wait till Sucker for Love is out, which I think it probably already is out at this point. And then Such Art Artist Simulator, I think is a VR game. It's still in early access, which is a shame because it should come out of early access. It looks decent enough for a VR game. And then we're back to Summer and Mara, which is now mixed. So it feels like it dropped in between. Like, people aren't loving it greatly. It's 66% in the last 30 days or 76% overall, but it looks like it's good enough. Okay. So, let me just very quickly, I really don't have time for anything, do I? If there is any news that has happened over the past 2 hours and 50 minutes as far as the stream, I'll talk about it on Wednesday. That's going to be it for this stream since I'm trying to rush. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.